Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Weekly Crop. Now, before I get into this week's product, I do want to sort of talk about the irony of my job. Now, as you know, my job is really all about telling you and communicating with you about all the newest tech, whether it's in cameras, lenses, or lighting. We get an opportunity to try things out and report back to you and tell you about how great a lot of this new technology is. And I am continually dumbfounded by the advancements in technology that happen even at a month-to-month level, let alone year-to-year. And so it's a really exciting part of my job to deliver this sort of technology to you. But at the very heart of it, when I'm not here, my favorite type of photography is still very much film photography. I have cameras that were built in the 1950s that I still use to this day, and I really love the filmic look. I really love the filmic feel. I love the whole experience. And that ties in to what I'm going to talk about today, which is I got an opportunity, thankfully from Leica, to test out their brand new Q2. Now this camera, you can Google as many reviews about this camera as you like. I think they're all great. You should watch them. But I'm going to offer you sort of a supplementary review on this camera to those. And really, the question is always, why would you pay, in this case, $6,700 for a fixed lens 28mm camera? It seems outrageous, doesn't it? Especially, when cameras are already quite expensive. And I want to be able to address that today, and I want to be able to tell you why you might want to spend that on this camera, and why you might not want to. And so I'm going to do the reverse of what I usually do. Typically, I start with all the things I love about a product, and then I get into some of the things that I feel very challenged by with the product. But we're going to start with the things I don't like about it first, and then when I get into the things that I do like about it, I hope to paint a picture as to where this camera sits in terms of its place within the market and who might want to buy this camera. Okay, so let's talk about all the things that I feel challenged by when it comes to this camera. There's not a lot of them, but when you're looking at a $6,700 Canadian camera, you expect it to have all the things that all the other cameras at the top of the line have, and it doesn't. So first off, it has DCI 4K video, so that's your 1:85:1 aspect ratio video in 4K, which is amazing, but then it doesn't come with any of the things that make video usable. So there's no ports anywhere, no audio in, no audio out, no HDMI, nothing. You just record straight into the SD card. And you know what, in many worlds, that's actually totally fine if you're recording audio separately with a separate recorder. That solves that problem. If it's got a strong enough codec inside, then you don't need to go out to an external recorder, for example. So that's one thing. But the bigger issue here is that when you put it into video mode, it doesn't give you any control over exposure. It's auto exposure, which makes no sense to me. It's certainly just a firmware thing. There's nothing in the camera that's going to make you do that, but it makes you do that. So unfortunately, you can't have control of video, and it creates a really nice image, but unfortunately, again, no control. And for real video shooters, even those who are kind of half video shooters, that's going to be super frustrating, and it doesn't really make it a real video thing. So you get 80% there with the specs, and then you drop the ball on the last 20%. The next thing is going to be its autofocus. It uses continuous autofocus with contrast detection, not phase. And so that means that there's just always a lot of hunting going on. When you kind of half press the trigger to get focus to engage, it's not always choosing the right thing. And then when it's choosing the thing you want it to choose, it's still going, it's kind of hunting back and forth constantly. And that's kind of what you expect from contrast detection, but you notice it very much so in this camera. So the autofocus is very underwhelming, although the face and eye detection does work. It just doesn't work as well as many of the other cameras on the market who have that feature. The next thing I don't love about this, and this is something that other people have complained about, and there's a bit of an asterisk to this because I think I'm going to expand upon this when I talk about the likes, is the auto white balance is a bit weird for the JPEGs. Obviously, if you're shooting RAW, it's not really an issue, but the auto, it just creates some weird colors sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So it's less predictable. If you're just working with JPEGs, then that's going to be a bit of an issue. You're going to want to make sure that you're custom white balancing to each situation, whether it's daylight or tungsten or fluorescent or mixed lighting, that type of thing, and that will get you more accurate colors. But it's sort of frustrating that the auto white balance isn't quite so good. The other thing that I don't love about it, which is sort of a funny thing, is because it's the thing that everyone loves about Leica, is that it's a flat surface here. And even though you got this really great little thumb catch, I find that with street photography, which is kind of what this thing is designed for, is you want to be able to just kind of like, hang it like this next to your body. And sometimes what's a really cool feature in street photography is to sort of like hang it in the body, tilt it up, and you get these really cool like sort of shots of people that make them look big and tall and imposing and everything. And you just have it just sort of down at your waist. Well, you kind of can't do this because you have to like super pinch this in order to be able to do it because there's no ridge here like there is on other cameras. So you're like, and you're just hoping that you're not going to drop it. So from a street photography perspective, I know it's traditional Leica to have this design, but I'm so used to now mirrorless cameras that have a bit of a lip that make it just so easy to just light grip and just kind of turn it and hold it a little bit better. So that's my complaint. Now, all of the dirt on it, I'm going to get into the really good stuff. Now, when we look at the price, $6,700 Canadian, I think it's around 5,000 US, seems like a lot of money. But let's look at this lens. So it's a fixed lens. It's a 28mm f1.7 lens. The thing is that if you were to buy this Summilux lens separately, you're looking at about a $3,500 lens. So the lens itself is half the price of this camera. So you're really just left with about a $3,500 camera Canadian, which makes the camera seem very reasonable. I mean, when you look at an A9 or an A7R3, that type of thing, that's within the same wheelhouse and the same price point. So really what you're buying here is not just, excellence in design, but you're buying excellence in optics. And that's what Leica is effectively really known as, is the world leader in optics. And so basically, when you take some of the world's best optics and you pair it with a sensor that is designed specifically for that lens, you're going to get some of the best image quality anywhere because you're reducing any of the variables that can really distort or affect image quality. So that's what you get with this camera. You get such a pristine level of image quality that you just don't get with a interchangeable lens camera. And Sony has also proven this with some of their models, getting some of the top reviews on DxOMark as a result of having that fixed lens to sensor technology. So that's what you're going to get with this, but that's still not the reason to buy this camera. And it's a great reason nonetheless, but it's still not the reason to buy it. What I love about this camera and what all Leica owners love about their cameras is they are the closest experience you will have to a film camera without shooting film. So what do I mean by that? Well, this camera performs best when you turn off all automatic features, when you turn off autofocusing, when you turn off auto exposure, because it feels and operates like a film camera. And the problem that I have with a lot of new tech is that there's too many buttons, there's too many options. It's almost paralysis by indecision because you have so many options in that menu system. You have so many options on your buttons and dials and toggles that it becomes overwhelming. And you never really harness the beauty of photography. You never harness the simplicity of photography. And that's what film photography gives you, is it removes all these menus. It gives you 3 decisions to make. Really, it gives you 2. It gives you shutter speed and aperture because you're fixed with your film speed. So in this particular case, Leica wants you to slow down. They want you to appreciate photography for the simple art of the photography. And that's where this camera sings, is when you turn all that nonsense off and you just get into the simple idea of framing and exposure. And there are, as an aside, there are lots of options in this menu. The menu is quite extensive and it does give you a lot of choices in terms of using this camera, but not so much like a Sony or a Panasonic. It's very limited, and so it's a very clean menu system. The other thing that I will mention, and this is sort of a asterisk that I mentioned from the white balance, which is when you get the white balance right. This is the very first camera I've ever used in my lifetime that produces a JPEG image that is as close to film stock as I have ever seen outside of the grain. But just the colors and the contrast feel very Ektar to me, like Kodak Ektar. They feel like some other Fuji stocks that I'm used to. So I was immediately blown away when I saw the JPEGs. I was like, whoa. This feels very different than every other JPEG that I've seen from any other camera. Maybe I'm romanticizing it because it's Leica, but there was an immediate connection with me in terms of the image that I saw and what I usually see when I'm shooting film. And so, who's this camera for? Well, this should not be your one and only camera. It is a fixed focal length. Now you can punch in on that 47 megapixels and you will get, effectively a 18 or 16 megapixel image at 50 millimeter focal length when you digitally zoom in, and I think like about 7 megapixels at 75. So plenty enough for social media. Even really, you can still print 7 megapixel image quite large. So more than you'll ever need, but the focal length effectively is limiting. And so I wouldn't spend $6,700 if this was your only camera. This is a bit of a luxury item in the sense that if you've got a workhorse camera and you want something to do street photography with and to travel with, and you have the budget for it, then you are going to have a heck of a time with this camera. You're going to have an amazingly wonderful time. And if you don't want to commit to film photography, if you don't want to commit to processing and developing and all this sorts of stuff, then this will get you basically almost all the way there. And will give you the flexibility of having still a raw image. So it is a luxury item that is worth it, in my opinion, especially when you break down the finances in terms of what you're getting with the lens and the camera. It actually is a very reasonable price for this camera, and I think it's really, really well worth it. So that's my review about this camera today. I really encourage you to try to seek this camera out and see if you can try it, because I think if you try it and you do what I say, turn it off, all the auto stuff off, and just learn to pull focus manually and make your exposure manual, I think you're going to really love this camera. And if you can afford it, I think it'd be a really nice addition to all the other cameras that you have in your lineup. And that's it for this week. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. As always, please subscribe to our channel. Like, thumbs up is always great. Thumbs down if you feel that too. Hey, I don't mind. And comment in our comment section below. We'd love to hear what you think about photography in general and about this camera and anything else you want to discuss. That's it for this week. Thanks so much for watching. Happy shooting.